This is our field office here. In fact, we is the Center for Land Use Interpretation. This is our Houston base, and then this site is owned by the Buffalo Bayou Partnership, which is the organization that owns a few bits of land around the bayou. Is sort of trying to clean up the bayou, make it accessible and interesting. And this used to be a junkyard. So when we walk down to the boat, you'll see that the soil of the site is this wonderful sort of cement with little pieces of car.
Shredder here, they actually invented this thing called the prolarizer, named after the family, which is used all over the nation. It was the first car shredding system, and it's now utilized all over the place. They didn't patent it, but they developed the first version of this car shredding mechanism, which basically you just put a car in it and it comes out as this kind of granular material practically, which is one of the main feedstocks for the steel industry.
They clean up the bayou by skimming it and collecting trash, and they collect it here. So the vehicles down in the water down there include things like the Mighty Tidy, which is this kind of garbage scow which goes around with open arms collecting floating trash and conveying it up into a dumpster that's over there. So this in a way is the place where the bayou kind of the catch in the drain of the bayou. If the bayou drains, some 350 square miles of Texas, and it all sort of shrinks and squirts down this little conduit.
The dirt that you will see is really just mud. Like everything else, it's just a muddy place. So it's the elevation changes so rapidly when you have a storm event that it's got this zone of like 8 feet of just sort of the water level can vary, can be at any point on that, and it's all controlled by a dam, which also affects the water level.
The waste goes out the back door in the form of solid waste to dumps and landfills, but in terms of whatever just kind of falls out of the dump trucks and onto the streets and wherever else, you all gets washed into the physical drainage system of the bayou, which is the main, if you imagine like a trunk of a tree and all the branches turn into all little storm drains that go back up into the landscape. This is the trunk of that big dendritic tree. And so they're trying to sort of catch some of that stuff to clean it up, but it ends up being an interesting way of sort of sampling the landscape too, sort of discarded refuse and the unintentional kind of elements of the waste stream. So this is a really great location for looking at the city, from the back door kind of point of view.
See this old tilt bridge here? It obviously doesn't tilt up anymore, right? This was made by the same guy that made the Golden Gate Bridge. Steel recycles 2/3 of what it produces in the country. So in other words, 2/3 of all the steel manufactured in the United States came from recycled sources. It's the only industry that recycles on that scale. And you think about it, the other third comes from mines in the ground still. Most of this stuff goes back into the steel industry, or goes to, even some of it, this right here goes overseas. China is the biggest customer for scrap metal right now because they're in such a crazy build mode.
Is there any idea how much they're not catching?
Most. And yeah.
And it goes to the ocean.
It goes to the ocean, and it joins the great fraternity of floating debris out in the Atlantic gyre. And, there's a few sort of maelstromic kind of collections of garbage in the middle of the ocean, in the Pacific and the Atlantic, and ultimately all those floating water bottles and tennis balls and whatever make it out there, if they don't sink and disintegrate, which they do mostly, but even if they do, their pieces often sort of slowly migrate into these great gyres, which are out there. There's 4 of them in the world, and it's just the places where naturally the systems of weather and currents sort of collect and create these kind of zones of debris collection.
For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. For everything you do, there is an effect. For every up, there's a down. For every pile of architecture, there's a pit of, for bricks or gravel or whatever. Everything is connected, and we have to, find those equilibria. And this is one great place to do that. And that's kind of why we're here. Right?
Yeah, right. We'll go between the ship channel and downtown. Here's downtown Houston. We're here. The bayou goes all the way to there.
That's the ship channel, about half of it. The ship channel is, federally controlled area because it's the largest petrochemical corridor in the world, amongst other reasons, but also because, it's a commercial shipping port and Homeland Security has rules about maritime safety now. And they have a whole battery of cameras that we'll see. We'll go right up to where it transitions into the zone. But technically you need permission to go out there and reason, and you need to clear it ahead of time. So we won't go any further than that downstream. But the ship channel begins at that point, right at the turning basin where you'll see the San Houston tour boat. So this stretch of the bayou is weirdly isolated from, at least from the water system in terms of recreational boating. It's just canoes, and then nobody can launch a boat here. And this bayou is a really interesting sort of incidental landscape in itself, full of all kinds of sort of unexamined things and qualities of the city that are, like I was saying before, kind of unintentional. These are the undesigned spaces, you might say. They're not architected, they're just sort of there. They just happen. And we'll see all kinds of things that are both sort of insignificant, but in a way also really significant if we just begin to sort of understand the value and connections of things. But there's an infinite number of ways to look at the bayou, and we just see it as really rich terrain. We all live in very kind of controlled, restricted, kind of physically designed environments too. So it's refreshing to get out into a place where it's chaos, where it's not sort of designed for you to be perceiving it in a certain way. This is a raw space. This is an untamed space, a place that is not scripted, right? It's just an pure artifact. In a way, it's more authentic than anything because it doesn't have some kind of overall design.